to me once again for another Blunt Business on CannabisRadio.com. And I'm happy to go and bring back a returning guest of the program. He appeared on the program right in the middle of the worst, deadliest, dreariest part of COVID in May 2020, in the peak of COVID. So you can't forget the time period. He manages the cannabis industry's leading regulatory and operational compliance software platform. We're happy to welcome him back, the CEO and co-founder of Simplifya, Marion Mariathasan. Thanks for being on with us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here again.
Hey, happy to have you back on. And we bring you back with an announcement that you made recently with a team about the Risk Mitigation Alliance, which brings cannabis operators savings on insurance premiums and compliance solutions. And about this, when this was launched, you said the following: under the RMA, we're going to, use the acronym. Eligible cannabis operators can easily opt in and take advantage of best-in-class insurance coverage and services with partner carriers and brokers. They can also access industry-leading compliance tools, Simplifya's services, as well as the majority of the cost paid for, which will help businesses stay compliant and up to date with ever-changing state regulations. And you've spoken with other organizations focused on risk management. We have on this program, and we even had those that have hosted a podcast here on Cannabis Radio. So what stands out about the Risk Mitigation Alliance in this new venture? What really stands out among what other offerings have been out there?
Well, I think, this is a very unique kind of initiative in that, the goal is for all the risk mitigation kind of ancillary companies that support the industry coming together and saying, look, we understand the markets are tough. There's a lot of compression going on, and prices, cost and price is something that's in the forefront of everyone's minds. And so coming together with the carriers and brokers that have been serving the cannabis industry alongside with Simplifya, that's been around for 6 years now, is to say, look, if you're using a tool like Simplifya, or if you're using Simplifya, that, we think that there's the risk profile of that operator is lowered, and therefore 70% of the cost of Simplifya will be paid for by insurance. And then when you're using Simplifya, then the insurance carriers and the brokers can say, hey, you know what? You're using this risk mitigation tool, therefore your risk profile again is lessened or lowered, and therefore we're going to discount your insurance premium, or we're going to give you a preferred pricing or something that helps you kind of alleviate this pain point of these costly things that an operator needs. So that's the main difference here, is that everyone that's in the risk mitigation space with insurance and Simplifya coming together, as well as banks even, to say that we want to help you save money but also preserve your most valuable asset, that's your license.
So this new offering now brings qualifying cannabis operators working with participating Risk Mitigation Alliance insurance carriers and or brokers to receive 70% of the off the cost of Simplifya's core suite of operational and regulatory compliance solutions, paid for by the participating insurance carriers and brokers. And customers of Simplifya are also eligible to receive the discounts on these premiums from those carriers or brokers at policy renewal or during new policy sign up. And operators who subscribe to Simplifya and work with RMA partner insurance carriers or brokers are now eligible for either a majority of Simplifya services paid for and preferred pricing on insurance premiums. So what is it about the Simplifya platform, Marion, that plays a role outside of the regulatory and operational compliance framework into risk mitigation?
Yeah, so we've been doing this for quite some time, right? And so over the last 6 years, we've really honed in on the kind of the key elements that are important for an operator. So I think one of the terms that's used very loosely in the industry is compliance. And operational compliance means we actually ingest everything that's published out there by a regulatory authority, right? From A to Z, from accounting, books and records, all the way down to waste management. And so in that, the recognition, I think, by insurance is to say that if you use Simplifya, we are a very pinpointed, very detail-oriented product. And so they can make an assumption that you're buttoned up in other areas of your business, which again lowers your risk profile. And that's really what it comes down to, is that insurance, banks, all these folks that support the industry that are risk averse really want to ensure that an operator doesn't have all these high risks, because it is a high risk industry, and so that they can comfortably support and give you the best products and services. And so for Simplifya, it's just that we've been around long enough that not to say that means everything, but we certainly know all the key elements that an operator needs to be adhering to ensure that they're running a properly compliant business.
And Simplify is now available in the 28 states as of late last year. Minnesota was now brought on board to now access your standard operating procedures, the smart cabinet self-audit platforms. We'll talk about those later. And with that said, will the Risk Mitigation Alliance, is this only being affected for those that can connect directly with Simplifya and those 28 states?
Yeah, so we're now actually in 29 states.
Okay.
And yeah, and so the great news there is that if you want to have 70% of Simplifya paid for, and the thing here is that cost is a factor, right? And even Simplifya, and having a tool like Simplifya, even though we think we priced it very well, it still becomes a line item, especially the more locations you have. And so by insurance saying that they're paying for 70% of Simplifya, it really drastically reduces that overhead. So it's meant to be a feel good all the way around for an industry that's struggling. So oftentimes people think insurance is kind of looked at as the bad guys, right? Because I think in any industry, it's like, oh, they take my premiums, but they don't ever want to pay out. So I think this is one way that insurance companies, brokers, and carriers are coming together saying, hey, look, we value this industry. We think we want to be able to provide you all these best products and services, and we want to continue to do that. But if you can help us, we can help you. And that is mitigate your risk. And we would love to be able to lower your pricing and do all this stuff. And so by paying for 70% of Simplifya, they're just kind of encouraging good governance and compliance from these operators. That's really the key element here, is just encouraging people to operate in a compliant manner.
Let's go to commercial break. When we come back, we're going to go ahead and talk about several issues in the areas of compliance that came up in the state of Nevada. And we also want to go and delve into the area of certification and coordinating with third-party lab testing to be able to get quality control into place. I'm here with the CEO and co-founder of Simplifya, who also, their team is also operating and managing the Risk Mitigation Alliance, which we'll talk more about a little bit later on the program. Here on Blunt Business, we're back after a short break.
Rolling into some sponsors, but we'll be right back with more Blunt Business.
Welcome back to Blunt Business. I'm here with Marion Mariathasan, the CEO and co-founder of Simplifya. And once again, a return appearance on the program. Now, I want to delve into several issues when it comes to compliance that have brought up. One in particular came out was a public health advisory that was issued by the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board. They were issuing a warning about 7 different batches of marijuana products. The agents discovered that several batches or lots of cannabis were treated with an unapproved pesticide, etifon, said to be a growth regulator, and affected products were sold between March 23rd and April 21st in 8 dispensaries across Nevada. So, I mean, we don't talk much about that, but the fact that there is something that might be tainted or might be the quality check might not have been put into place, and this product goes out and it spreads out to various dispensaries to kind of keep an eye out. It's like there's not so much about saying about a recall for this, but that's kind of things happen. But with this kind of story, talk about the levels of consequences that are possible. If any company makes a mistake like this in a legal cannabis market in the U.S., because it's not like your traditional where something goes defective or wrong and there's a recall for it. That's not applying here, does it?
Well, that's a great question, Rocco. I mean, I think it's a very complex situation and problem, but I'll tell you, in terms of ramification for these dispensaries or the manufacturer, I think it can come all the way down to massive fines or loss of your license, right? Because it's a highly regulated industry that everyone has a lot of eyes on. Essentially, you break one or two rules, no matter how big or small, the ramifications can be quite large. And it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, but it's certainly not a good look for them or for the industry. And I guess we'll have to watch it unfold as it goes.
Now, the other thing I want to ask is about, there's a lot of companies. If I go ahead and just put the Google search for cannabis compliance, there are a lot of companies that are coming on board. Oh, we have funding, we have more services we're providing for compliance, this and that. But when it comes down to it, with those that you're working with right now, a lot of companies, MSOs or smaller end companies, are looking to go ahead and use seed to sale tracking or softwares like yours to handle the process of compliance alone, but without the human component. They want to be able to automate it. They want to be able to have, well, we could just put cameras in there. We could just set something else. And there's the part where some people feel like, well, we could just streamline this, and compliance, it's not something we need to put a whole lot of money into, nor a whole lot of thought into. For those companies that come in to work with you, talk about what the level of compliance means to what you're doing. And if it's more than just the tools that you have, if there's something more to what makes Simplify stand out to lead in the charge to having good above ground compliance.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So I think, what makes us really stand out, and I think, so our clients range from Jushis to Cureleaf, big MSOs, all the way down to, small operators. And end of the day, we always tell people, as I said earlier, your most valuable asset as an operator is your license to operate. And, having a tool like Simplifya to help you kind of walk through all the different kind of nuances and complexities of compliance is really vital, right? Because again, as I had mentioned earlier, operational compliance, it's not just subsets like POS compliance or seed to sale compliance. This is literally A to Z. It's the full breadth of what cannabis governing authorities are putting out there. And so when you use a tool like ours, it literally helps them streamline, it helps them save time and save money. Because again, whether you have a large compliance team or not, these are ever-changing regs. There's a lot of moving parts, right? Standard operating procedures that we provide for our operators that we extrapolate from the regulations. We have the smart cabinet that actually tells them different sets of applications and when they need to be updated, when they need to be renewed. License tracker that tracks all the different type of licenses. And so whether you have a large team or a small team, these are just a lot of things to stay on top of. And so Simplifya, again, was designed to ensure that whether you're small or large, we take a lot of that heavy lifting and guesswork out of what you need to do to have good governance. And I think that's a key difference as to why we've been around for 6 years and why both large and small operators use our software.
But that's the one thing too. Everybody talks about compliance software, compliance solutions, which is tech-based, which is all computer-based. What about the human component that you could add to the mix? Is that something where there is a human component or an encouragement of compliance from much more than just the software standpoint?
Yeah. So, even though we're a software platform, everyone behind the scenes, so Simplify is a rec tech company, right? So half of our team are lawyers and policy folks, and the other half are engineers. So there is that comfort level of knowing that there are real people behind Simplify that are monitoring the regulations, talking to regulators, clarifying points. Again, taking all this vague areas that you don't really understand or might not understand or don't know about, and that Simplify and the team behind it are doing all that work for you. So even though it is a software company, I think it's really important to understand that there's a lot of smart people outside of myself, way smarter than myself, that are really watching out for the interests of the operators.
I make this point because we have to put this focus, a spotlight on compliance, but the fact that Do I need to say it again? Do I need to refer to CanTrust and $77 billion worth of valuation lost because of a couple of missteps in compliance, of which Health Canada and the cannabis compliance bodies over there decided to basically destroy the company and has not been able to recover since. It had to change names in 2019. I'm just telling you, if you don't take this seriously, companies, and there are some that are corporate and that are going to say, you know what, we just need to go and do whatever just to take care of our bottom line and only put so much as necessary. We can't have bare minimum compliance, especially when we're not regulated federally. But when we are, then those rules are going to be put into place. And every company out there needs to be doing more than the bare minimum. I'm repeating myself. I'm a broken record on this program, but I'm going to keep saying on every program, every time we talk about compliance, because it needs to be said. Anything you want to add there, Marion?
I think that's a great point. I think it's not, it's a collective here, right? I mean, I view the cannabis industry as a movement. And, there are still plenty of people out there that don't want cannabis to be legal, whether it's on a federal level or even, that are really against even states legalizing it. And so I think giving them ammo when you have issues like what happened in Nevada, or I think there was a operator in California that got fined 1 point some $million for,
Yep.
I can't even remember the exact law that they broke, but or regulation that they broke. But the point is, we want to minimize the finger pointing to say, hey, look, this industry, they're not doing things by the way the government wants them to do, and therefore this is not a very good industry, because you have those naysayers. And I think compliance, while it's probably the least sexiest thing or the thing that people don't want to think about, it is about risk mitigation for yourself as a business, but also for the industry as a whole, which is why this risk mitigation alliance piece, I think, really comes at the right time for the cannabis industry. It's because all these different folks, whether it's banking or insurance or operational compliance such as Simplifya, all of us recognizing, okay, how can we make this easier and more streamlined? And by the way, provide some sort of financial benefit to encourage better compliance standards and governance by these operators. And so I'm 100% with you there. It needs to be something that should be the focal point of operators that are existing and the new ones that are coming on, as new states legalize.
I want to move along into a story that I actually asked the CEO of a lab testing company on our grassroots marketing series about a couple weeks back. And Forbes report on this story. And just to give the talk about it, I want to just refer to this new certification sets standards for cannabis lab testing. Forbes put this out, and I actually caught this before I hit the paywall. But anyways, they put a paywall now, you bastards. Now I'm going to just take this story and I want to get your take on this. Let me take a passage from what was said. States that legalize commercial cannabis production and sales mandate that products be tested for contaminants and levels of THC, the primary psychoactive compound. Industry standards for such lab analysis have not been developed, which has allowed some labs to inflate THC levels to appease clients eager to offer most potent products. And 2019, Leafly reported that inconsistency among results from different labs has prompted the lab shopping as producers search for the highest potency levels for their goods. And without going into more detail, I had a story I just thought brought up as well from University of Northern Colorado and another lab testing company, proving the point. They went to 8 dispensaries and they saw there was a THC potency disparaging between 10 and 37% potency. It's all over the place. And so there's lab shopping out there that they're saying that, they say that they're trying to, it's like getting a second opinion. Let's get the better information out there to work with without really being concerned with what quality's out there. So, Marion, talk to me about what can be done from a risk mitigation standpoint when it comes to third-party lab testing.
Well, I think the standard needs to be around GMP, right? It's like any other industry that's now kind of become part of our society. Alcohol, for example, you don't get a chance to say, this bottle of tequila says 40% alcohol by volume when it's not really the case. And I think when it comes to consumers, we need to really standardize products. And, it's unfortunate that we see this kind of deviation still when it comes to different labs and the results that they're posting. And so I think again, standardization is the key, and GMP is probably right now the best way to move about that, and ensuring that every lab tester and every manufacturer kind of adheres to these standards, because otherwise, again, going back to my last point, you have people that clearly don't want the advancement of this industry, and if we continue to have these sorts of issues, it's going to raise more flags and more questions, and it's just going to delay this movement to where we want it to be. And I think, again, from a compliance perspective, it all kind of falls under this compliance arm, right? Or compliance umbrella. Standards, governance, good practices. These are just elements that other industries have embedded into their operations, and we in the cannabis industry have to do the same thing if we want to see advancing.
Marion, I want to follow up on GMP after the break, because we're going to make a point about this, because we're hearing more and more about companies that are, or at least consultants out there that I talked to on the program. I talked about Kim Stuck with Alley Consulting, that's working with the GMP Collective and partnering up to go ahead and start instilling good manufacturing practices as what should be the standard for compliance across the board for all cannabis outfits, and at least in the States, which is already being affected and done in Canada and overseas and Europe. So let's talk about that after the break. I'm here once again with the CEO and co-founder of Simplifya. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned the website name, simplifya.com, SIMPLIFYA.com. Take a look at that as we go to break with final questions after this.
Rolling into some sponsors, but we'll be right back with more Blunt Business.
Rounding the home stretch with my guest here on Blunt Business, Marion Mariathasan, CEO and co-founder of Simplifya. Website is simplifya.com. Again, spell it out, SIMPLIFYA.com. We talked about good manufacturing practices before the break, and I'm glad you pointed it out, because refresher course listeners, we're going to do it one more time. They're a core part of the food and beverage industry and the pharmaceutical industry to ensure manufacturers create safe, reliable products through a consistent set of documented processes. And they're not currently applying to the cannabis industry, but they're widely expected to in the future. So you need to be prepared for that anyway. And for cultivators and manufacturers, conforming will not only, and I'm taking this from a website that does on cultivation, and like obviously they set GMP standards for themselves. So they say that in the story that I'm taking from, conforming to those standards now will not only result in safe processes and consistent products, will also give them a competitive advantage when GMP standards do apply. And they talk about the parts that are the difficult part. It's strict. It's very strenuous. It does require more overhead and more resources and more manpower to make sure this is done. So you're talking about the guidelines that have to be done. Adhering to GMP means establishing documented, repeatable processes, providing the same result, safe, high-quality products, vital to the overall success of any company that desires to sell consumer products, cosmetics, food, and eventually cannabis. Now, I want to take from a story from Rolling Stone I've talked about before on the program. And they talked about what are GMP standards, why should the global cannabis market care? And they wrote about business leaders should take a proactive approach to compliance, whether they want access to the global market or just increase revenue at home. And my question I'm going to ask you is, would the GMP, you're saying it is one of the best courses of action, or what do you think about those accumulation of certifications, certified seals, all these extra things that are being put out there that you see, like a lot of hemp companies or CBD companies are using certificates of analysis, all these different things are trying to show, well, this is our way of showing quality control, but it's not GMP. So why would you say GMP should be the end all be all?
Well, that's a great question. Again, I think, certifications and seals and whatnot. I mean, I think it certainly is one step forward. However, depending on who's providing the certification, it's not standardized, right? I mean, just again, like any other industry, if one product has a certification from, company A and another product has certification from company B, again, they could be looking at different ways of measuring and standardizing, and that I think kind of fails to get to the sort of comfort level that consumers want to have, especially people that are, maybe trying to dip their toes into cannabis and try out products. I think, GMP, fortunately has been, a standard for quite some time. And I think with that in perspective, we just need to at least head in that direction. I think making consumers feel safe, whether that is through seals or certifications, that's certainly in the right direction. But I think eventually we will need to standardize as an industry. And that's the only way, I think, to get consumers and, again, the people that are not so favorable towards cannabis to, open up and say, like, hey, this is hitting all the benchmarks that other industries have. And then, hopefully that gets us to a more favorable position from a federal perspective in moving in that direction as well.
Now, I want to just get your take. Why isn't the GMP above others? What makes it honestly so much better as a higher entry point or a higher level of compliance? What makes it so much of that? Is it just the rigorous testing, the repetitive processes? Like, what is the real standout that makes this show? Is it what there is because of other industry standards? It's such a high standard for everyone else that why can't cannabis meet the same threshold?
Yeah, I think the GMP itself. I think the term answers that, right? Because again, it's all about standardization, and so it's one set of rules that's being repeated over and over again to ensure that everything that comes out is of the same quality and of the same standard, right? And I think that's the key element why I think people look at GMP as the ideal scenario here, because there's no real deviation from one manufacturer to another. It's if everyone's using the same set of standards, that the quality or the potency or whatever the case may be that's coming out is going to be similar instead of deviations. Because I think for the non-cannabis user, if you're thinking you're getting an edible with 5 milligrams and it might be 7, all of a sudden they have a very bad experience with that, then it just starts to freak people out. And so that's why I think standardizing the way you're testing and the processes and the compliance behind it's vitally important.
This was something going back into the 70s, 1975, the World Health Organization instituted this level of good manufacturing practices. It's been around 50 plus years, almost 50 years coming up. And it's obviously been tried and true. Why cannabis and why the industry might be hesitant towards instilling these practices from a cost standpoint, from a resources standpoint. I mean, how much more to the bottom line would it make? And obviously, if somebody's working with Simplifya, what more would it take to make sure that you're able to get a company that works with you to reach GMP status?
Yeah, so unfortunately, because I think the cannabis industry is so strapped for cash, right? I mean, you really don't have the ability to do all the things that other industries do, and so cash is something that is a major consideration, and costs are. And so I think for right now, people just try and do with what they have to ensure that they are putting out something that's safe and high quality. But unfortunately, cost is a big factor, and I think that so from 280E to safe banking, all these things that we really need to help kind of elevate the industry. I think when those things come into play, I think the industry and the folks within the industry certainly want to do the right things. They're just kind of put into a corner here with all the things going against them, unfortunately. Yeah.
I would still say, if there's any way possible, I'm always the kind of person I like to be proactive. I like to be ahead of things. I don't want to be worrying about an obstacle like this. And, then there's rules put into place and no one's prepared for it. If there's a way as a company out there, any of you listeners, that you need to find a way to get to that level, that's the end goal right there. If GMP is already a standard across other industries, and eventually federal government or whoever's going to be coming in, compliance boards through other governing bodies, state to state, whatever it might be, that's a standard everybody else uses. And it's been tried and true. If you can reach that, there are already enough companies out there that are consulting, that are working on that, that are trying to go and reach those standards. That level of certification says a lot. And that's the one that everybody knows more than all the other certifications and seals out there, regardless of how good and how well intentioned they are. Just have to make that point. Let's talk about Simplify as we wrap things up, Marion, and talk about the suite of products that you have. So there's, first of all, the standard operating procedures. And real quickly, so your team of analytical and regulatory experts, you can do generic and license specific SOP bundles. You have the smart cabinet, which is what comes to the documentation, keeping and organizing documents. Smart cabinet is offering a user-friendly, convenient online document storage hub, eliminating the worry and stress of organizing and storing critical documents, and self-audit for your team of lawyers or regulatory analysts reviewing state local regulations. A simple checklist of yes or no questions to determine if they're operating in compliance with all the rules related to the license type in their appropriate states. So with all that, if you want to just take a little bit, just to talk about each one of those suite of products there, the RegTech solutions, and tell people what they should do if they're interested in being involved and getting more involved in what you're doing right now with Simplify. What should they be doing?
Yeah, thank you. So Simplify, again, as I'd mentioned earlier, we exist to ensure that licensed operators have a simple, cost-effective way to be compliant from an operational perspective and a regulatory perspective. And so, the audit tool is used, again, by small and large operators. You walk through your facility, we have a web app, a tablet app, a mobile app. You answer a bunch of yes or no questions broken out by categories. And once you're done with that, it'll spit out a report that says, here's where you're compliant, here's where you're not compliant. And for those areas of non-compliance, we give you action items on how to remediate those areas of non-compliance with the actual citation and the governing body that published that regulation. And so, you're completely covered in terms of understanding who published it, what the citation actually says, versus in addition to us asking that very simple question. Then when it comes to SOPs, again, our regulatory affairs team, they looking through the regs, they extrapolate and create standard operating procedures that can be customizable with an operator's own SOPs. They can pair it up, they can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. Same thing with the smart cabinet and even the license tracker. So those are the products we have for the license operator. And then, we have products from license verification that banks use, insurance use. We have a product called Simplify Market Guide. That's kind of like a high level regulatory set of all the key elements from lending to tax. Then, it's just a whole host of different products that we bring to the industry, not only for the operator, but for those that serve the industry. So even for insurance companies and whatnot. And that's kind of how we got into this risk mitigation alliance, is by working closely with insurance companies that have been serving the industry. And so lots of products and there for the industry, but the key focus for us is really the licensed operator. We believe that you give the right tools and products for the operator and give them a good foundation, and then the industry as a whole will continue to thrive and grow. And that's kind of our mission.
And so with that said, website again is simplifya.com, simplifya.com. And for those that want to go ahead and click on the website and go ahead and reach out to you, if you can give just a quick overview of what they're going to be able to do when they connect with you and what they should probably have prepared before they do.
Yeah, so with this new risk mitigation alliance, we have a lot of inbounds coming in with people wanting to save money on their insurance premiums, but also have 70% of Simplify paid for. So essentially, name, company, number of locations, who their current insurance broker is, and we take that and, we reach back out with, here are the, folks that are part of Risk Mitigation Alliance, and get them the right pricing and the discounted pricing, and have Simplify paid for. So it's all about trying to help the industry save some money from the operator perspective, but also encourage them to instill good standards and practices into their business.
Let's go ahead and close it out there. Thank you again for joining me here, Marion, and letting us know about the Risk Mitigation Alliance. Is it just right through Simplify if people want to go and learn about the RMA? Is there a separate website?
Yeah, it's simplify.com/Risk Mitigation Alliance. Or if you go to simplify.com, there's links to get you to the Risk Mitigation Alliance side of the page. But yeah, thank you for having me on here. It's great to be back.
Hey, same here. And we'll keep it up and always just keep posted on what new things are happening with Simplify out here on Blunt Business. And again, to join with Marion Mariathasan, CEO and co-founder of Simplify, here on the program. And thanks for being on, Marion. And thank you, listeners, for listening in, as you always do. Of course, find the show, subscribe, share, like. If you find it on the YouTube channel, because it's out there on our Cannabis Radio YouTube channel. We have CannabisRadio.com, home of Blunt Business, the Cannabis Radio app, which you can also download now on Apple iTunes or Google Play. And of course, you can subscribe now wherever you find podcasts on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Audible, and all the major podcast platforms. And until then, next week, we'll talk to you next time. The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.